The Dawnbringer Chronicles. Last Flight of the Grimbar.
"Home port bound then, sir?" asked Captain Thrummond. Admiral Lockie Crufin took a quick swig of Haskell, his last flask of pure Zilfin amber. Damn right it was time to see the windswept city again, and more importantly, its alehouses. "Aye," he said, "no more room for even a whiff of aether gold anyways. It's been a profitable venture, Captain. I'll be putting through my request for your commendation as soon as we dock." Thrummond's moustache twitched ever so slightly, which for him was a extravagant gesture of delight. The captain of the Grimbar was not a gregarious sort, but then again, Crufin wasn't paying him for his winning personality. "Won't be sad to leave this place," said Thrummond, nodding down over the gunwale towards the settlement of Veldman's Gap, 20 or so meters beneath the Argonaut ironclad's gleaming hull. The Sigmarite strongpoint was a unlovely hovel, nestled between two flat-topped hills and obscured by a palisade of solid iron oak. It was cramped and windswept, its squat buildings semi-permanently obscured by a swirling grey-blue mist that chilled to the bone. "No, indeed," said Crufin. "Though they've paid well for our help in mopping up these Groby raiders, you can't deny Cyclestone's not aether gold, to be sure. But it'll sell well enough at Gold Keel Market. Should earn the crew a nice little windfall." Such pleasant thoughts were interrupted by a muted horn blaring far below. The sound was coming from one of the human watchtowers, and Crufin could see soldiers rushing back and forth, waving their hands and gesturing. "Something out there?" Thrummond muttered, squinting out towards the valley that spread out ahead of the human settlement. The immediate terrain was masked beneath a thick carpet of fog, hanging low and heavy in the air. "Thought I saw." Admiral Crufin thumbed down the magnoscope lens of his helmet and scanned the mist. At first he saw nothing. Then something burst from the clouds, a chunk of rock the size of a main engine. He briefly lost sight of the missile, flicking back his viewing lens in time to see it crunch down atop the perimeter wall of Veldman's Gap. It left a red smear behind as it bounced into the settlement proper, before finally punching through the side of a house. More stones followed, more screams, more thudding sounds of impact. "Bait to quarters!" Crufin roared. "Bring us about, Captain Thrummond! Clear the guns for action!" The crew of the Grimbar exploded into motion, Argonauts dashing forward to detach mooring lines and load the ironclad's cannons. Crufin glanced across the deck to see Gunnery Sergeant Boffleson and a half-dozen of his Grundstock Marines taking up firing positions, levelling sleek aether-shot rifles and handheld mortars towards the source of the commotion. "Grundy's balls!" said Captain Thrummond, as half a dozen gigantic forms lumbered out of the mist, brandishing makeshift clubs and hollering drunkenly as they bore down upon Veldman's Gap. "Cara Grunty! Cara Grunty!" Mega gargants. A storm of boulders and torn-up tree trunks hammered down on the settlement, crushing panicked human soldiers flat or smearing them across the cobblestones. One of the gargants took an awkward run-up and put his foot through the strongpoint's main gate. Metal and wood crumpled, and the foolish brute staggered, cursing and grabbing at his bloodied toes, much to the whooping amusement of his fellows. Another wiped his hands across the battlement, snatching a pair of flailing humans and tossing them over his shoulder to their death. A squadron of 3 single-engine Grundstock gun haulers came angling down from their patrol route. The escort ship's forecannons blared, and puffs of red mist rippled across the Gargant's torsos. One vessel was caught by the edge of a Gargant's wildly swung war club. Spiraling crazily, it struck the hillside and burst into flames. Now the Grimbar's own heavy guns opened up in earnest. Zilfin-cast smoothbore cannons roared, unleashing a storm of superheated aether-shot upon the advancing Titans. One of the mega-gargants roared in agony, a hand reduced to bloody tatters. Another swayed, poking dumbly at a smoking hole in its skull through which brain matter could be glimpsed. The brutes now turned their piggish eyes upon the ironclad. The largest, a grizzled, one-eyed old devil whose head was enclosed in a beast's skull, bellowed a command. Crufin felt a queasy sensation as he met the greybeard's stare. This was not the dull, bleary visage of your typical gargant. Those eyes betrayed cunning, a bottomless will of hatred. Each of the Alpha Titan's mob reached down to grasp a handful of debris or a loose stone. Tongues protruding ridiculously in concentration, they took aim at the Grimbar. "Brace for impact!" Crufin cried. At the rear of the ironclad, Captain Thrummond cursed and strained as he hauled on the ship's wheel, trying to reduce the Grimbar's profile to face the coming barrage. Metal groaned as the vessel yawned violently to the left. Too late. As the first projectile, the crumpled ruin of the Strongpoint's main gate, slammed into the Grimbar's hull, the deck tipped almost vertically. An Argonaut flailed past Admiral Crufin, screaming. More impact. Thud, 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 crumpling bulkheads and pulverizing gun turrets. Something exploded, a loose grudge-setter warhead below the keel, perhaps. Before he could lock his mag boots in place, a scalding shockwave ripped the Admiral from his perch and sent him skidding across the deck in a shower of sparks. The Grimbar entered a lurching spin. Smoke spewed from a punctured engine. Crufin cursed, unable to halt his momentum as he slid towards empty air and a 20-meter fall. "I've got you, sir." Strong hands seized him by the arm. Gunny Boffleson and 2 of his marines had wrapped a tow chain around themselves and the larboard pump valve, and were clinging desperately on as Captain Thrummond fought to wrestle the ironclad level. Somehow he managed it, bringing the vessel to a halt just above ground level. But no sooner had the ship pulled out of its death spiral than a monstrous leering face appeared at the bow, directly in front of the Grimbar's main sky cannon. Grabbing hold of the forerail with one gnarled hand, the Megagargant snatched up the dazed Caradron gunner, strapped into the firing seat. It stuffed the poor wretch into his mouth, biting down with a sickening crunch. "Dramacos!" cursed Admiral Crufin, and his volley pistol bucked in his hand, spitting aether shot into the brute's eyes. He strode across the deck towards the Gargant, still firing, as Boffleson and his remaining marines opened up with their own fusillade. The Gargant howled, raising a hand to fend off the storm of aether shot. A mortar shell struck its palm, splattering the Grimbar's deck with flesh and gore. Crufin reached the forward sky cannon, hardly thinking about the danger, so terrible was his rage. He heaved his suit-clad bulk into the seat and grabbed hold of the firing lever. A flashing rune told him that there was a shell already nestled in the breach. The wounded Gargant loomed above him, mouth open in a spittle-flecked roar, bits of Duardin flesh stuck in its teeth. It raised its war club overhead, ready to finish off the stricken ironclad. Crufin pulled the lever. There was a blinding glare of light and a thunderous report. The sky cannon's high-yield Zumbrak bore ammunition was designed to pierce several inches of reinforced steel. It easily punched through flesh and bone, detonating inside the target's belly. The Megagargant collapsed in 2 wet chunks. Any satisfaction Crufin found in the kill swiftly evaporated when he hauled himself out of the gunnery seat and took in the carnage of the Grimbar's main deck. One of the main engines was gushing smoke and aether gas. Rivets had torn loose, exposing the innards of the sky ship. He could see fires raging in the hold. Corpses rolled back and forth gently as the Grimbar rocked. Somewhere a klaxon blared pitifully. Captain Thrummond was slumped against the ship's wheel, wheezing, his salt and pepper beard streaked with blood. "Status, Captain," Crufin barked. "She's about done for, Admiral," the old Duardin gasped. "Both engines breached and the rear stabilizer shorn away. Can hardly keep her in the air." The words sucked the heart out of Loki Crufin. most of the crew dead, an entire wind cycle of profit and progress snatched away in an instant. His grand dreams of returning to the windswept city with a hold full of aether gold and a record of service that even the Admiral's Council couldn't ignore, all done for. An admiral that lost an ironclad was a pariah. He may never be trusted with a fleet master's commission again. "Get yourself on the ground, Admiral," said Thrummond, grimacing as he dragged himself upright. A sliver of metal as thick as a boarding hook had punctured his bodysuit, just below the heart. There's nothing to be done about it now. "Come with us, sir," Waffleson said in a voice that brooked no disagreement. "Time to go." The Admiral staggered after the gunnery sergeant and his marines in a daze, flinching as another Gargant-hurled missile whooshed overhead, missing his skull by mere feet. Almost in a daze, he secured himself to the grav-ladder and hauled himself over the gunwale, and then felt the stomach-twisting lurch as he dropped down to the earth a dozen meters below. His war-suit's gyromatic stabilizers whirred as he struck hard rock, absorbing an impact that might otherwise have shattered both of his legs. The Grimbar soared low overhead, trailing smoke. Captain Thrummond may not be able to operate full payload alone, but the Grudge-setter ram mounted on the ironclad's prow was more than a potent weapon. The dying vessel ploughed straight into one of the Gargants, crumpling its skull and sending it flying backwards. Somehow, Thrummond kept it on a smooth bearing despite the impact, bringing the Grimbar around and hurtling now towards the leader of the Carrack Gronti, the one-eyed killer with the skull helm. "Come on," muttered Admiral Crufin. "Bring the Wazzock down." But this Mega-Gargant was too savvy for that. He turned to the nearest building, a small Sigmarite chapel, and put his massive hands around the structure's narrow spire. Muscles bulged, and veins popped in the brute's neck as he ripped the length of iron free and hurled it like a javelin at the approaching airship.